Welcome to another refreshing episode of The Local Dive. This is Alex Scott, joined by Dean and Sarah.
Hello.
Ashlyn Portero.
You guys got too much out of that
And
just now.
that was
that
lovely.
intro.
It was really good.
It was too enjoyed.
crisp, like the opening of the can. And then producer Biceps Jacob.
Hello.
Oh
Let's
my
go.
gosh.
Flexi.
At what point does this cross the barrier into like inappropriate?
We're not there yet.
Always commenting on Jacob's
We'll-
biceps.
we'll- It's Jacob's like we've crossed the line a long
Jacob's
time ago.
Jacob's like, I'm working on a new producer for this show.
It's like if the state line is the boundary, we're in Thomasville already and headed north.
Oh my gosh.
We are excited to dive into another episode, but as we do, we will wade into the shallow end, and today's deep end is going to be all about materialism. And so we figured we would start by sharing where we are most materialistic in
Okay.
our lives.
So is this like in a way for this category synonymous with like bougie at all?
Yeah,
Kind
probably.
of like, does that sort of?
Yeah.
I think they tend to go together.
I was going to make it.
Because you already you have a master's in philosophy currently.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yes, everything matters.
And I don't know what to talk about.
Mine, I think mine, I probably have like 15, honestly, maybe 20. But mine is probably hotels.
Explain.
Like, I don't even like Hamptons. Like, I'd rather spend more money and get like a really nice hotel, even if I'm only there for like 8 hours. Like,
What if you're like in a remote location, or you're just like traveling, like it's not like your destination, you're like en route? Does that still
I was
apply?
like, Dean doesn't do remote locations.
Yeah, I was saying, that's another thing I'm materialistic
Fair.
about is remote locations.
Fair.
If we're like driving late and I just need to stop. Yeah, I do like one of those interstate hotels, but it'd have to be like a very nice chain. I mean, like
indoor
very nice is the wrong word.
hotel.
Yes. That's another thing. No outdoor room facing to the balcony.
You're not staying at the Knights Inn with a K.
No, I spoke at a Disciple Now conference one time in Birmingham, and they had me at this Comfort Inn where the door was outside to the balcony or whatever. And I called the guy. I was like, "You got to move me. Can't do it."
Oh my gosh.
He was like, and I didn't even give disclaimers. I was like,
You're
and
just
so
like,
like, man, I'm
staying
not
here."
trying to be a certain way. I was like, bro, you gotta get me out of here.
I can't do outside hallways.
Can't do outside always.
I at least need the person who's coming to murder me to walk by the front desk before they do.
Yep, and probably also like college sports clothes. Like
Yeah.
I buy them all. I feel materialism kind of like involves buying a lot.
Yeah.
Like I buy that kind of stuff all the time.
Ashlyn?
This is how I'm most materialistic. Is
Yeah.
that the question?
Yeah.
I would say tending towards like being a bad steward of my resources would be eating out. But like that doesn't have to be like a bougie place.
I feel attacked.
So
Like you're fine at Chipotle or...
yeah. So it's like in that sense, I'm not like trying to get like eternal fulfillment out of, I mean, sometimes Chipotle can sometimes do that if it hits right. But listen, I like my chips.
I've
and
never
guac,
had
okay?
Chipotle hit like that, so...
Depends on which location you go to. But I would say in like true materialism, I would say probably more like, I don't like stuff that would fall under like health and beauty. Like if I'm buying like hair products or like certain like skincare, shout out to Kelly Labrador, my skincare guru. Like it with that stuff, I would definitely tend towards like, oh, if it's more expensive, then it's better. And, there's always a new thing to try. And like some of that's fun, but it's like you can also take that way too far where it's like one day you are going to be wrinkly and old and you're going to die. And so we just need to also accept that. So that was a little intense, but I'm just being honest.
We're just going to leave it right there. One day you'll be wrinkly and old and you're going to die.
That's your next philosophy class.
On death
So
and
depressing.
dying.
Why
with
did I-
Ashlyn Portero.
Why did I choose to study any of this?
Yeah, so I think like I'm too cheap to be like truly materialistic in a lot of ways because there's a lot of things that I like want, but I'm just too cheap to buy them.
Let's all be like Alex, everyone. That's what he's trying to tell us.
No, it's not
Saint
that.
Alexander.
It's not that. I'm like I just said I was cheap. I don't think people should emulate cheapness. But
Where are you materialistic in your heart?
oh, in my heart, there's a lot of places I'm materialistic, and they're usually very expensive, like cars and watches and the finer things of life. But if like a real example is like, I'm not a coffee snob. Okay. Like I've never tasted caramel and, goji berry like in a cup of coffee on the tasting notes, but like I'm not doing Dunkin' Donuts. Like, so I will go to Lucky Goat because it feels like it's better. Like there's
we're really talking more about like being bougie right now.
I guess.
And they're cousins.
I was going to say, I
Right.
think they're sort
true.
of the same
Yeah.
thing. Cause like,
That's true.
like I've like, in terms of like, there is something that the cup saying Lucky Goat like brings me that I would not feel if it was pink and orange Dunkin' Donuts. Like I would be.
I see what you're saying.
So like there's like status that comes to me with Lucky Goat that people are like, Dunkin' Donuts, okay, cool. Like you spent $2 on that coffee.
Right.
So I think there is like I don't know, there's like some sort of
No, I hear that.
Now, y'all's assistant who you work with every day, Kelly Labrador, is going to be very triggered by this episode. She loves her some Dunkin'.
Yeah. No, we're not trying to like dump on Kelly.
Yeah.
I would.
No.
Good.
I would
Mercy.
be wrinkly and old right now if it weren't for Kelly. So just showing some love.
Yeah, okay, here, McCafe. Is that better? No, I don't know. Like, I mean, fill in any coffee that's not like, I don't know. It just that I don't want to say feels cheap. It's not, you know what I'm saying.
Producer Jacob told me his most materialistic tendencies is the brand of dumbbells he buys and also protein shakes.
That's definitely not true.
Do you have a real answer, Jacob?
Mine would probably be, I'm very brand loyal to Apple, so I would probably spend a lot of money on Apple if I could actually afford more Apple things.
That's fair. All right, if money was not an object and you could be materialistic in any area of your life, just one area, but like, and don't say
money and holiness were not objects.
yes, yeah. Holiness is removed too.
Sanctification is not in the Bible.
It's like we're just really going off the rails right now.
Hey, we're just showing our hearts, our sinful hearts.
It's the shallow end.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So money's not an object. You can be as materialistic as you want in one area. So you can buy all the things or have all the status or comfort or whatever. What's the area where you are going to be as materialistic as possible?
See, I know I'm materialistic when I'm like, ooh, this is really hard because there's so many. It's like all of a sudden my heart is like, here's all the things that you desire. How do you narrow it down into one? I really don't know.
Oh, I'm very materialistic too. It's like a major thing. So I would probably have a different pair of shoes for every day. Or I would,
what kind of shoes?
all of the map.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the map. Yeah, it's just shining leadership across this I'm about to mention.
Oh my gosh.
So I think though for me, I probably for real to answer the question, I would probably eat at a high end restaurant every night.
Yeah, you did feel attacked earlier, didn't you?
But what money was not an option. I eat like some high. I'm not talking like Carrabba's. Okay, I'm talking like really nice steakhouse, like that kind
like
of
sides or a la carte.
Yes, and I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cars would probably be like a random fetish is not the right word, but infatuation. We'll go with infatuation. That's much better. Sorry, Mom. And
Pat Scott, shout out.
So like I think I would just like, and I mean, yeah, I think I'd just buy cars and have
What I appreciate
garage
about
full of cars.
What I appreciate about you with cars though is more of an interest area for you. I think a lot of people that buy like high end cars, it's more like a status symbol.
Yes.
I mean, why else would you spend that kind of money on a car, right? I mean,
well, like half of the cars that if like somebody handed me $100,000 and said go buy cars, most of a lot of the cars that I would buy would not be cars that would bring much status. Like I would buy like Mr. Bean's Mini Cooper, like. So there's like these sort of nostalgic, like random cars, like old BMW 3 Series, like just, I don't know, weird stuff.
I think I would say, I would probably say one of two things. And I made this rule when we were talking about this, that you can't do house stuff. I'm not saying a house, but like I would have everything in my house and maybe like my life just like taken care of. Like I would have like somebody to do my yard to like the T, like not just like mow my grass, but like full on landscaping, like really nice.
Like changing out, the seasonal flowers.
Like it would be like Tallahassee nurseries at my house.
Yeah.
Like I would have
That's
that.
a good answer.
I would have like
answer.
someone who just constantly like updated my house inside. Like it would be very much
House cleaner.
It would be about like appearance at that point.
3 times a week, house cleaner.
Yes, something like that.
Essentially, like the way Southern living changes, your house would change.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say probably that. 5 or 10
Fair.
years ago, I definitely would have said clothes. Now I'm just like too tired to keep up with trends. And so it's like, whatever. Just like, I'm a millennial. I'm going to wear my skinny jeans and my side part, and Gen Z can judge like they are.
Speaking of my materialism, I just got a notification email from the Peabody in Memphis hotel. Let's go.
There you go.
There's nothing wrong with a nice hotel.
Or travel. I mean, I would definitely be materialistic about travel.
Yeah, you're upgrading to like the
Oh yeah, first class, super nice luggage, like really nice. Like we go anywhere in the world that I want to see. See, I told you, it's like all of a sudden it's all coming
much
out.
luggage could you afford? I mean, you travel
In
with
my
a lot of
dreams, a
luggage.
lot.
Yeah.
You guys think in reality it's bad? You haven't seen my dream luggage.
To our listeners, Ashton has a strong reputation amongst all of our church buddies across the country of packing 4 or 5 suitcases for a 24-hour trip.
I like to be prepared for any.
I was going to say literally
outing.
for anything.
Yes.
Maybe 2 weeks when we're only there for 2 days. But hey, all right. So moving, Jacob, do you have any answer to that? We didn't.
Mine would probably. I'm gonna break the rules too. I'm gonna say I'd probably just have a bunch of different houses. Like I'd have a house in Australia, a house at the beach, a penthouse somewhere. Yeah.
That's a good. I didn't think about like materialism through owning property.
Does the penthouse come with a gym downstairs?
Probably.
Good.
Yeah,
Just checking.
probably.
It's a great idea.
All right. Well, yes. Well played. I hope you have a nice job to get you to all those houses.
Architect. He's gonna be an architect.
All right. So how would as we move into the deep end, when we think about materialism, oftentimes it does come back to just like owning and buying stuff. And I think maybe we tend to think bougie, like buying nice things, but I think it's more than that. Is materialism just buying stuff, or is it beyond that?
Oh, I definitely don't think it's about buying stuff. I think buying stuff's like the way down the road end result. I think it's much more than that. And obviously, we're going to talk about what that is.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say, so I get, what is it, and then what maybe drives those things?
Well, I was reading an article on the Gospel Coalition by a financial planner who's a believer and wrote an article. And he said, considering the following, I struggle with greed, because materialism, they can be linked together, right? Yeah, obviously. Because I ultimately seek, and then he has a blank space. I seek blank and believe money can provide it, or I envy people who are richer than me because money can help them experience a greater degree of blank. He says, based on the research and experience as a financial planner, I believe we can narrow down to 4 possible options for filling in those blanks. And again, it's not a pastor just like preaching a sermon. This is a financial planner. The primary motivations for financial decisions are control, which he says is security, comfort, which is freedom, power, which is status, and approval, which is love. So control, comfort, power, approval. He says none of those are inherently bad, but each of us is prone to turn at least one of these into an idol by valuing it all above all else and looking for money to provide it. I mean, whoa. Right? That's pretty spot on.
Yeah. So if those things are, well, Ashlyn, do you have any thoughts on that before we?
No, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I would just say that to me, materialism is putting your hope and your treasure into materialistic, so like, worldly possessions, we'll say. So yeah, not just things that are like nice or expensive, but literally material things, like as in not things that are going to last eternally. We could say physical things above Jesus. And I think when we can probably get into this a little more, but like in Matthew 6, when we see, Jesus say there your treasure is, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That follows as he's teaching on, do not do things so as to be seen by others and elevated in others' sight. And so it's not just like, don't spend money. It's like, don't store up treasure for yourself that is worldly for the purpose of then also being seen and highly regarded in the world's eyes, because then we're idolizing possessions and we're putting ourselves in a place where we don't belong. So to me, that's like kind of the essence of materialism.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful too. And Kathy Keller wrote that materialism means that your happiness, joy, contentment, and satisfaction, and I think like ultimate satisfaction, is tied to something in the material world.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't necessarily have to be, purchasing things, but like the financial planner said, maybe it's it's approval. It's like, if I look a certain way, if I'm not, what did you say earlier? Wrinkly and
Old and wrinkly.
old and wrinkly. Yeah. If I'm not old and wrinkly,
But it's coming for all of us.
It is.
Then I will be seen as, I don't know, less old than I am. And so I find contentment in the fact that people view me as young, like see me as younger than I am. There's like this status and this adoration that comes from this very materialistic, ultimately, kind of view of life.
Yeah, and I think a good discipleship question Christians need to ask each other more often is, why is this so important to you? Which can stretch in a lot of different areas. Like what is it? Like what's the end goal here? Like, why does this matter to you so much? And this certain type of whatever that thing might be, and that goes beyond materialism to any kind of conversation, right? But why it could be like, why is the election so important, like so ultimate important to you, all the way to like, why is that outfit? Why is that experience? Why is, that china, that wine? Like, why is that so important to you? That might be a good answer, Michael. Well, it's not as important to me. I just enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, okay, well, that's cool. But like, but the result of that is, I think that where the idols come in is when then misplaced worship happens. So if like I'm paying more money a year for my parking spot at a Florida State football game than I am giving to my church, it's like, we need to talk about that. Mm-hmm. But like why is that so important to you? Like, not that you can't have the parking spot. It's probably a lot of fun for you, and you enjoy being close to the stadium and having a tailgate. But like, it's when those things that's when there's a problem, when those things become like higher priorities.
Yeah. Well, as you were saying that, I mean, that almost that's sort of like the ultimate question of like trying to figure out like the root cause of really like your idolatry. And I think at some level, like materialism is just that. I mean, it's like, you quoted Matthew 6, right? Mm-hmm. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Well, like that's idolatry. Like if we're putting something, whether that's a feeling that a beach house in Australia gives us, or, the way that we look, or, the perception of somebody, whatever they think when I, pull up in a nice car or whatever it is, like there's something that I'm putting over a desire ultimately for the Lord, right? There's something that's kind of superseding that. And so I think that, Neen, to your point of just that being a good discipleship question in general, is like, it's sort of the scalpel that helps us cut away at really like what we're making a God in our life.
Sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, and I think people should be able to enjoy the money that they've made and worked hard for and those type of things and invested or whatever it might be. But again, the question goes back to like, to what extent? Yeah. Like what else is being neglected? Like what, why is this so important to me? Type of idea.
I think a good question to ask yourself, and I'm like convicted as I even say this, is because yes, it can be connected to and very often is connected to how we spend our money, but even just placing too much hope or finding too much security in things, even if it doesn't have to do with like constant spending. So, but I think a good question to ask yourself is like, if I don't have this thing, or if I don't, if some material reality is no longer available to me anymore, am I still okay? So if I don't have this house anymore, if I can't put myself together, like if I can't, do my hair a certain way or wear certain clothes, and that might be things you already have, but if you didn't have those things, like, am I still okay? Like, and really we're asking like, is Jesus enough? And so sure. I think that's important too. And if you feel, and that's where I think we can really relate to, I think about the parable of the rich young ruler, who comes to Jesus and he says, I've kept the whole law. And Jesus says, well, go sell all your possessions and give to the poor. And he went away sad because he had great wealth. I don't read that as like an indictment on wealthy people. I read that as, if we think about having to lose all of our worldly material possessions and we're filled with great sadness, knowing that what we would gain is Christ, then our hearts are misaligned. And so that's something I think we can ask ourselves is like, is Jesus really enough if I don't have these things? And if the answer is yes, then we are free to enjoy the good gifts that God gives and allows us to have.
Definitely. Yeah. And there's a reason why Jesus does use words like talking about how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And that he's not talking about how you shouldn't be rich. Again, he's not saying it's bad to earn a lot of money or make money. But what he's talking about is the dangers of what it can do for us. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to just always be conscious of that. And here's what makes this complicated in a discipleship conversation is no one thinks they're rich.
Very true.
Like nobody does. Yeah. You could have a household income of, $350,000 a year, and people would still say they're not rich
because
somebody
know
else
somebody
is more,
richer than them. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you could, or you just make a really nice living that can allow you to live in a nice, Killarn neighborhood enough, good gosh. I mean, how many people can do that in this world, right?
Yeah.
And like you still say, oh, we're not, we don't have any money, and so and that's what makes it kind of hard is to have conversations about materialism. Is no one thinks they really are, because somebody else in their eyes is worse, which is also a discipleship issue because we see in the scriptures the conversations about what comparison can do. I'm not like that person, and the complications in that in terms of what it can do to our hearts and things such as that.
How much, this may be a broad cultural question too, but I think for the Christian, it's still a reality. How much is, quote, keeping up with the Joneses sort of a driving factor in the way that we and it's not just spend our money, but oftentimes the way we live our lives and the way we spend our money are so closely linked that it's hard to see the difference. But how much of that is a reality?
Yeah, the financial planner in that TGC article, said that he listed security and comfort. I think that's more like the storehouse, kind of what we built up and the security and those kind of things. I think for materialism, I think so. He would link that to greed. He wouldn't say it's wrong. He's a financial planner. He's not going to say it's wrong to save money and invest money. He's going to encourage you to do that, right? Because then you'll be a burden on somebody else, hopefully, right down the road. But I think if it was just about materialism, I think the biggest thing is status. I mean, we're doing it for someone else. Why does someone dress their 7-year-old in nothing but perfect brand clothes? A 7-year-old, right? That's a thing in our town, right? I'm not saying that and it by itself is bad, but the question is why. You might just go, well, we like him and look nice or whatever. Okay. But that's a thing, it's usually done for other people. And that's where it's really kind of danger zone for us.
Well, and I think, there was an article that I read, not related to this. I just happened to come across it. I think it was yesterday or the day before. And there was a company that did a survey of 1,000 American adults, and 70% of American adults surveyed had less than $1,000 in savings, and which blew my mind. I mean, and this was across this wasn't just people who were minimum wage income earners. This is across a wide spectrum of income. These people didn't have a month, even a month of living expenses. And I just was, as I was thinking about that, as you were talking, I just think how much of that is linked to the approval of others. I have to, and it was cited as the cost, the cost of living, and, it was a big factor there. And I'm yeah, maybe the cost of living is significantly higher in some places, but usually I think of people my age, cost of living is more cost of how they want to live than cost of what it is to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of issues with Dave Ramsey that are negative, but a positive thing is his old phrase. It's probably the thing he's most known for saying is "live your wage." Mm-hmm. And that's a spiritual issue too, right? So another thing that makes me nervous, just in discipleship conversations, is talking about keeping up with the Joneses. Another thing that it can do is talk about all these sins that the scriptures talk about that all can go trace back to this about materialism, greed. Is then what happens then? Envy, bitterness. Just false representing people, like how when I hear Christians yell about the 1% and those type of things, Like there's a conversation, of course, to always be had about those kind of conversations about like economics and, and financial, I guess justice and, those kind of things, but inequalities or you want to call it. But like for Christians to berate or attack people that have more than them, that's problematic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? That's envy, that's bitterness, that's jealousy, all those type of things. That's as much as keeping up the Joneses can cause us to want more, it also can cause us to demonize people who shouldn't be demonized.
That's fair. Yeah, because we don't know that's because somebody has more that they're living in a way that's inherently sinful. They may actually be doing great things for the kingdom through,
especially it's been honestly earned.
Yeah,
like received or those type of things.
So if at the root of materialism is sort of this idolatry and misplaced, kind of longing for satisfaction in the world, what are the ways that we can, obviously, Dean, the question, why is this, whatever this is, so important to you, is a helpful one. What are some of the ways that we can wean ourselves from the world in the context of, materialism?
I think one of the first things is to be generous. I try to model it for my kids, like to be generous people. That's when you read 2 Corinthians 9, I think it is, 8 and 9. One of like the main remedies we're given in Scripture to fight greed, materialism, the love of money is to be generous people. It's almost like what God uses to like combat against that, is the opposite of that, which is to be for others. So I think trying to figure out ways you can practice generosity is really good. And then the other side of that is let people that are trying to do that, let them do it for you. Like somebody wants to buy your lunch, don't go, no. Like just say thank you. Somebody, wants to help you out with something or wants to, whatever it might be, or doesn't make you pay them back when they gave you whatever. Like if somebody runs by, if you text someone and say, hey, while you're out, I saw you're out, can you grab da-da-da, I'll Venmo you. Instead, like if someone says, no, I got it, don't be like, no, Venmo, just let people be generous. I think that's really important. So that's just one thing that comes to mind. Outside is your classic, like, search my heart, oh God, type of approach, to ask questions like Ashton was talking about, like, is Jesus really enough? Like, and most Christians would probably, like, say, oh, yeah, of course he is, but we're not really self-aware about that. Like, what does that really look like? Those are things that come to mind immediately.
Yeah, I think those are all good things. I would add spending time thinking about what occupies our mind. So I just think it's important for us to realize too that we can find too much comfort and security in material things, even when we aren't being greedy or trying to buy a lot of things. And so, and on the flip side, we can also just spend too much time thinking about, what we could have. So I think there's that's definitely a big part of it. And then I think we can also go into, do I spend more time thinking in worldly ways or drawing more comfort from, the relationships that I have or the job that I have or even like the food that I eat, things like that. Am I more filled with joy, over a meal, like because of the experience of the meal or because of, the fellowship that I have there? Like just trying to think about what occupies our mind and like where does our mind turn to? And sometimes that might be literally, something that I want to buy, like more, just getting more for myself. But it might also be putting too much comfort in just, worldly circumstances, like literally material things that we're not meant to. And so two examples I think of, one in the line of like just objects and consumerism, I guess, would be, if I'm sitting at home on my couch and I'm just like, trying to kill 15 minutes or something, one of my first instincts is going to be like, let me see what, jcrew.com has going on today. Like, do they have a sale? Is there anything I need to be buying? Like it's a new season, things, new styles are rolling out. Like I need to see what's out there. That is just where my mind will go. If I'm laying in bed at night trying to fall asleep, I'm like, maybe I'll look at, Nordstrom or, something like that. It's like, okay, that's a problem because that's also a time that I have, 15 minutes of, quiet or solitude in my day where, my mind ought to be turning to the things of the Lord. And I'm not saying that to sound super spiritual. I'm just saying that's a time to spend with God, where a lot of times we'll choose other things that have no eternal or lasting significance to just like fill our time. And in some way that like, fuels our soul in a small, sometimes unrecognizable way. Another example that I think of, I definitely experienced this. In fact, I had a conscious moment of realization of this when I was in college, but I have talked to other people specifically in college, but I don't think I think this could translate to any other phase of life, where I remember one time being with my friends, and I don't know if we were like just hanging out at someone's house or on a trip, but it was like everything was focused around like just us having fun. And I specifically remember, this is going to kind of sound cheesy, but I'm going to take it a different direction. I specifically remember like having this moment of awareness of just like how grateful and happy I was in that moment for like these friends and these experiences. And I remember thinking, I just don't think how things could get better right now, like than this, and literally in my mind to the end of like, how is heaven going to be better than this? I mean, I'm just being honest, like literally that I had that thought, and immediately I felt like a spirit of conviction. And I knew in that moment that the Spirit was convicting me and that the Lord was going to teach me, no, like your comfort is not in this world, even in the good fellowship that you get to enjoy with your friends, it's in me. And he has taught me that over the years. And I have talked to other people where they will say, you know, at great times in my life, I will just have a flicker of, how does it actually get better? Like, do I actually, and that's a faith question. Like, do I actually believe that it's going to be better than this? And so I think God is kind to also, deprive us of, spending too much time in that dream world where we think that the material comforts are the best parts of life. And it doesn't just have to be, I have these flashy things that I've bought myself. It could also be that I'm putting way too much emphasis on the physical experience that I'm in right now, and that's not turning me to God and worship.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And we can see God's care for us too throughout all this. You know, how he warns us over and over again, you know, the love of money, root of all evil, building your house on the sand rather than on the rock. And we can see God like actually looking out for us. Like a heavenly father to his children. He wanted to protect us from what it can do to us in terms of materialism in general.
Well, and recently, Tim Keller was on a podcast, Life and Books and Everything, and one of the things that stuck with me is the way he was talking about he's battling or walking through pancreatic cancer. He's like, he actually goes on about not calling it battling cancer. He's like, the only thing I'm battling is my sin. But then he turns around and he talks about how he and his wife Kathy have actually, in light of this sort of, in light of this disease and the maybe brevity that it's placed on the last potential few years of his life, how he's experiencing things that he just neglected to realize that were beautiful and restful and God's grace in his life. Like, he said we used to travel and, we were always blown away by looking at the water when he lives in Manhattan and he realizes that the East River is right there. And so I think sometimes like there is in this pursuit of more, even like, I mean, this is sort of contrasting, Ashlyn, what you were saying, but in this pursuit of more, and that could be anything, we miss how good the Lord has been to us. Like, I mean, Dean, to go back to your example of like wonderful dinners, it's like, and I'm not saying this to convict you. I'm just saying like, what a blessing that you don't have to think about dinner, but,
Sure.
but oftentimes, or like, I mean, the fact that I can spend $4 on a coffee, like that's evidence of God's grace in my life. And so I think sometimes too, to sort of reframe, asking, is Jesus enough? It actually allows you to experience, and you have to ask the question, like, you can't just frame that in like, all of this is God's blessing, right? Like, I'm going to go, buy a $2,000 whatever, because it's God's blessing and he wants me to enjoy life. That's not what I'm saying. But when you do have the ability to kind of pull back and realize that this thing is not ultimate, but that it maybe is from, as like the circumstances are in such a way that the Lord has provided this experience or this good pleasure to you out of his grace, it actually allows you to enjoy it rather than just being consumed by like, oh, I need, this restaurant only has 3 stars. I should be at a 4-star restaurant or whatever. Like
Definitely.
It actually, yeah, only 4 stars for that guy. But it just allows you to actually enjoy the blessings that God has given us.
And no, I think that's a great point, Alex. And I would say, I mean, as you're talking about different experiences, like experience is a great teacher for us. And I was having coffee with one of my best friends was in town last weekend, and we were actually at Lucky Goat. We were at a bougie coffee place, but we were having coffee and we were talking, and we got onto the subject of like generosity and money, and we were saying, it's we both, like, the Lord has taught both of us in like the joy that comes from being generous and being able to give. And, that it's fun to, like, I have a younger sister, it's fun to take her out to dinner, and get to, just, pay for her dinner and just have that time together where she doesn't have to worry about that, like stuff like that. It genuinely, I'm not trying to sound great about that, because there's plenty of ways I can be way more generous, but we've learned the joy that comes from generous giving.
Totally.
But it makes me look back at, like, when I was in college, or I mean, even like as a kid, and it makes me wish, man, in those seasons of my life when I felt like I really didn't have a lot, I wish I had still had more faith to be generous then, because I think we all sort of have this mindset of, like, in the future, when I have this much money, I'll be generous because then I'll feel more secure. But really, it's like none of this is really secure or guaranteed. And so we're just called to be generous with what we have. I mean, we obviously see that in scripture. And so that's something that I'm trying to be more aware of, is that in moments of practicing generosity, when I experience that joy, to do what you said and to recognize that it is a blessing and it's a grace of God for everything that we have. But it also makes me look back and think, man, the times when I really didn't think that I had enough to be generous, I did. And I wish I had have been, because not only would I have been, blessing somebody else, and also just being more, I would have probably experienced more freedom, letting go of what I have. But the Lord would have been kind to also give me that joy that, I was deprived of. So
yeah, I got in a car accident when I was in seminary. I wasn't hurt or anything, but the car got knocked. It was in a parking lot, and the car got messed up pretty bad. And I was just like all bent out of shape about it. I mean, it's obviously a pain in the butt, and the car, and what am I going to do, and all this kind of stuff. And I told a story like a while back in a sermon illustration, like years ago. But my next door neighbor in our seminary apartment, Will Smallwood, and I were he's the vice president of Louisiana College now, and we just random, but we were talking outside afterwards, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the worst. Just every, like, sky's falling, this and that. He looks at me and goes, dude, it's just a car. And at first I was like, what? but then I was
my car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then I just like took a deep breath in that moment, and I was like, it's just a car.
It's just a car.
It's just a car. And like, that would be just, I want to have that mindset when it comes to all the things of temporary things in this world. Like, it's just a car. And so like, I still use that to this day on certain things. Like, it's just a car. Yeah. It's just a blank, it's just a car.
It's just stuff.
It's just stuff. Yeah. It's just stuff. So that was helpful. He didn't mean like, don't be a good steward of it or anything like that, but like, it's just a car. Yeah. That was always helpful for me. And also I want to say that I think my dad is probably modeled, well, I'm much more bougie, materialistic than he is. I mean, my dad's probably like one of the least materialistic and also most generous people I know. I mean, he just like never cared about that kind of stuff. My mom does, but like my dad never cared about that kind of stuff. That's so, like, growing up, like, it really was modeled to us. Like, he just did not sweat. He never cared what people thought. He just like never was going to spend money on things. He wasn't cheap either. He's not cheap at all, but like, he just wasn't going to, he never had an expensive car, even though he had a good job and was successful in his career. Like, there were times when his kids had more expensive cars than he did. And when we were living in the house, he did for real. He just didn't care about that kind of stuff. Was always super generous with us, probably even like worked longer than he needed to because he paid for all of us to go to college. And I went to private college. My brother went to private college. My sister was in a sorority, so like he's always been just like an others focused guy. Mm-hmm. And so that it's helpful to have those kind of models in your life of people who, he never talked about it. He just did it, and so now all these years later, I look back at like how generous my dad was. And I try to like model that, where I'm definitely need to work on my materialism and bouginess, because I'm significantly more like my mom than I am my dad when it comes to that. But in terms of the model I had, my dad, I'm like, I think my dad's the greatest guy in the world. I mean, truly. But like that was helpful for me to see that in him.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways that's so true of the Christian life, to see, aspects of the faith modeled well, and that we don't realize, I think, even in our discipleship often of others, how much people will pick up just from what we model. Like we had lunch with a guy a couple days ago, and he's a pastor's kid, and I was asking him, like, okay, what were the things that growing up in a family where your dad was in pastoral ministry, like what were the things that stuck with that were really helpful for you to see and to, to kind of live under? And he said the thing that he remembered most was his dad being up every morning reading his Bible,
Wow.
like faithfully every day. And that's the thing that stuck with him. It's a simple thing, but it had a profound impact on his life in the same way that, so it's like, how often do we just probably need to take that question and reflect and think, okay, if people were watching me, what are the things that they would be picking up? Am I living a generous life? Am I serious about the scriptures? Am I putting am I putting feet to the things that Jesus asked me to do in my life? And just how much I think we can do some self-reflecting on to realize what we're modeling to others. One of the other things I wanted to ask, and Ashlyn, some of this is based on this idea of how do we know Jesus is enough? Like what, but at some point, like the Lord, maybe in his grace and in his kindness, is actually going to remove some things from us that bring us that comfort. And it's going to be a season of kind of trial or testing. And, like how do we walk through the Lord taking away those things that we find comfort in and actually fall into the belief that Jesus is enough?
I'd love to know.
Coach us up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Softball.
Wow. Yeah. In all of my life experience, the Lord's been really good to me to sustain me in a lot of ways, and provide for me. But I would say the first thing that comes to mind, and this probably isn't even the most important thing necessarily, but I think we have to remember that the Lord disciplines those he loves. And so if maybe we're in a season of want or finding ourselves lacking in some way, or material comforts have been stripped away, I think first being honest about what is the Lord showing us there, because so often we're so afraid to be in painful situations, and we just and think about it, if that's an idol, or if we put something on a pedestal and we're worshiping it, and then the Lord in his grace tears that down, like our hearts are prone to first try to put something else up there to replace it. So I think first stopping and slowing down to say, okay, I'm in a season where some type of material comfort has been removed from me. Now, what is the Lord showing me in my heart? Where do I not treasure him enough? Where do I not lean enough on his word or his promises? Like, where are those not the most beautiful and satisfying and fulfilling things in my life? And so I think if we can just slow down and not try to go into pain management or looking for something else to fill that. And that's hard enough as a believer. So if you're not a believer, think about it. You have a totally different framework for this. So we have to have a lot of grace, I think, with people, really walk with people and share truth. But yeah, I think how to go to the Lord in prayer and just, and even if it's, God, this stinks. I hate that I don't have these things, or, this thing is really just a painful thing not to have, or, I feel like my life stinks in this way. Like, that honesty and openness before God is a place for him to come in with his loving grace and begin to realign our hearts. Whereas if all we're doing is trying to ignore that or to put something else up in its place, then we're just moving further and further away from the life that God has designed for us to live and finding our satisfaction in him. And so it's easy to say, we've just got to remember that, Jesus is enough and we rest in the promises of God. And like, yes, that is true, but to actually walk through that and learn that through lived experience, like that's the Christian life, and it's hard. And so I think you've also got to be around really good, solid people who can, bear your burdens in that, who maybe you can confess sin to if you're like, I just realized that this thing is an idol for me, and I've got to now deal with God refining me and stripping that away and putting himself back in that place where I've turned away from him. And I think as Christians, we can serve each other well by trying to be more aware of, like, are we inadvertently cultivating materialism in people? Like, by the way that we treat people or by the people that we associate with or by the things that like we hold up, like it, you know, are we in some ways, because as we've talked about, you know, a lot of people are chasing material things for the purpose of status. And so are there things that we're doing to make certain people feel like they're not enough to us? And gosh, when you think about that, it's like, oh man, I need to go like sit in a corner and evaluate some things in my life. And I don't, you know, those are all very introspective questions, but I think those are some places that we can start to sort through that, so that, you know, if/when the Lord does do that. And then even practically, like if there's a need, like we're called to meet it, you know. And so if you know someone who just genuinely has like a material need, you know, we can find, that's the beauty of the church, we can find ways to help meet those needs. And, you know, even like on, you know, we have benevolence funds and we have, you know, ways of coming in alongside to ease some of the financial burdens of church family members, and you know, prioritizing membership in that because we're going to take care of our own people, and then we're, you know, also working outward and compassion ministry. So there's other types of financial support and general practical things we can do. But those are just some things that come to mind.
That was really good.
I also think we have things to learn from believers who were poor, you know, and who have suffered. And, you know, I think that's, you know, Jesus talks a lot about them and just like really lifts them up, you know, so I think that is maybe a little underrated, you know, is what we can learn from people who love Jesus and don't have a lot. In our own churches, all the way to like experiences in other countries. You know, when I went to Colombia, I haven't been on very many, you know, in poor countries or international mission trips. But I went to Colombia and I preached there with a team from our church, and it was really eye opening to see people that lived in like, I mean, it was like third world. You know, across the bridge was like where Shakira lived, you know, and like Edgar Renteria was a baseball player, and, you know, people like that. Like, and it was the Boca Grande, you know, just amazing area. And then across the bridge is like the slums of the slums of the slums, you know, and to see these worship services, these people who like love Jesus, man, it was like, holy cow, you know, by the world standards, they have every reason to be mad at God or to be, you know, and they could also, it's not like they're naive. They know the other side of the bridge and what's out there and those kind of things. And so I think there's something there too, to like from other brothers and sisters, we can just learn what it looks like to live that.
Yeah, I think like Ashlyn, as you were talking the thing, and Dean, I think even what you said reinforces this too. Like at the end of the day, our like in an American context, it's very easy to think we have like lots and lots of needs, but our biggest need was spiritual. Like our biggest need is that we were, you know, separated from God by our sin, and that we needed to be reconciled. And so this is obviously very easy to say, it's very difficult to do and to cultivate as a belief, but like Jesus is and was, you know, our biggest need. And so for the Spirit to sustain us in Christ, like, is what we need more than we need anything else. And so to actually just remember that apart from Christ, like any need that is met is kind of worthless. You know, in this side of heaven, like that's to me, that's the part of the way to walk through the Christian life with that in mind, and then everything else is sort of icing on the cake in a sense. You know, I mean, it's hard. It's very hard to do. I'm not saying it's like, well, just remember Jesus is better, but that's the need that more than anything we needed fulfilled. And so like that's really, to me, that's the way that we can look at somebody like at a poorer brother or sister and go, no, like the same need that they have is what's met in Christ. And then for whatever reason, I have more and they have less, but like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Right. And so, but it's obviously hard to, when you have more, to maybe think that sometimes.
Yeah. And I think when we're talking about material wealth, obviously there's a lot of wisdom that we need to be able to live our lives, to honor the Lord with what we have. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so as I'm thinking about, you know, when we think about how much we have, how much we're blessed with, I think it should produce like a healthy fear in us too. Not like a fear of what's going to happen if I lose it, but like a fear of like, all of this has been given to you. It's been entrusted to you. And that should like make us a little, you know, that should make us tremble a little bit, I think, because when we're confronted with how much you actually have to steward, all of a sudden it becomes, it when we're looking towards material wealth, material gain, it seems like everything we have is like reduced, to not that much or not that important or not as good as what other people have. But when we are thinking about, look at everything that the Lord has entrusted to you, all of a sudden what I have like grows exponentially. And then it's like, okay, and what am I doing with that? Like, what is all of this driving towards? And so, yeah, I think if that produces a good fear in us, and then we ask the Lord to lead us to be faithful in what we have and in using what we have, and to go back to the very beginning of the conversation and enjoying what we have so that we can be people who are free to enjoy the good gifts that God gives us and then share them with others. What a full way of living, as opposed to kind of this other way of just constantly chasing and never seeming to get enough or be enough or to have enough.
Yeah, I think the key word you said was gives, the gifts that God gives. 1 Corinthians, what do you have that you didn't receive? So always as Christians, we should be careful with language of, well, it's my money. I worked hard. Like a lot of those things, all is God's money first, but even that probably is true that you did work hard, that you did earn this, but have humility in that and realizing like, what do I have that I didn't receive? Oh yeah, you worked hard. Well, who gave you the ability that you have to work hard? Yeah. Or maybe your job requires high intellect. Who gave you that intellect? Or maybe it comes with like good instincts, or how many people like walked into a great situation, in their life because their dad built a company, or because they don't have to worry about money because they have a trust, or because or they inherited these investment properties from their family. And we've seen humility when it comes to those kind of things.
Yeah, that's well said. Hopefully this has been a helpful conversation, as I feel like I have a lot of reflecting to do personally, but so it's been encouraging and also convicting. But as we think about sort of stripping away maybe parts and bits of materialism piece by piece to lean into Jesus, we're going to make a hard turn, though, and head into the local on tap.
So back to being materialistic.
And, yeah,
I'm taking Chrissy to Savor for dinner tonight, and I will not hear a word about it. Thank you.
I was going to say the materialism...
apologizing as I walk in tonight.
is gonna have to continue for a second. What is your favorite local on tap? What is your favorite place to spend money in Tallahassee?
Okay, well, as much as I love Tallahassee, we are not so great on the shopping. Compared to other, comparatively, we're going back to comparison here, but which is probably a good thing, although online shopping. So yeah, I would say in terms of a brick and mortar store, probably Target is where I can do the most damage. Locally, I love Midtown Reader, so I could go in and just like browse and buy all of the books. But also, I can be very materialistic sitting on the couch at my home. So that's where
Instagram ads, sales everywhere. I click on them all the time.
I am influenced. And now Instagram has that terrible notification that's like, you have a new shopping update. So like if you follow an account that has, the little shopping bag icon where you can like tap on the picture and it shows you the price, now it'll tell you when like a new post has come. So it's just like, get away from me, Satan.
So your couch is the answer.
Yeah.
So if we had a major sports memorabilia store in town that sold like full-size helmets, all that kind of stuff, like a big one, I would be all over that. Yeah. But we don't. So that's what I do when I go out of town. I would probably say like a store like Southern Compass, next to Whole Foods here in town. That'd definitely be one of them for sure. Same time, Midtown Raider, I can definitely do some damage in there as well. But probably like that, like a Southern Compass type of store. Yeah, that would probably be like, just like basic polos and...
Is it cheating if I say Chick-fil-A? Because if you looked at my bank statement, that's probably what it would be. It's like my favorite place to spend. I'm going Chick-fil-A.
Oh, I spend
tasty waffle fries.
Chick-fil-A is not expensive, but it adds up when you go every day, like I basically do. Yeah. So yeah, I'm in there with that.
Per my bank statement, it's probably my favorite place to spend money. Jacob?
This is a hard question because I'm like Ashlyn. I do most of my shopping online. Mine would probably be, honestly, Lucky Goat or Starbucks. I'd probably spend more money in person getting coffee than anything else.
There you go. You're well caffeinated.
Yes.
All right. Well, we look forward to another conversation next week. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to The Local Dive, a podcast diving into deep and shallow musings about Christ, the church, and culture. don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow The Local Dive on social media and continue the conversation with us on Instagram and Twitter at The Local Dive Pod.